Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This is a job that's been rumbling on for some time because of COVID and one thing or another, which now seems like ancient history. It put a lot of things on hold for us, and one of them was the sort of post-COVID period, getting parts and things like that. But anyway, this is the Jaguar E-Type, which is finally finished, the restoration on it. This is a Series 2 car, more of which in a little while, but as always, through restoration, sometimes it's the same with a house, a boat, a plane, whatever. Until you really strip it down to the bare bones, you actually don't know what you're going to be replacing or restoring or leaving alone and redoing or whatever. And with this car, it became quite clear at a certain point that we were at a tipping point with it in terms of repairing the original monocoque or unitary body, the tub, which is essentially from here back. The bonnet as well is a thing. It's no small entity. They're quite a tricky car to restore, actually, considering their relatively low market value, Jaguar E-Types. We realised that we were going to end up, if we wanted to keep the original body shell for originality's sake, we were into quite a bit of work actually just to do that. Or the other option was to buy a new heritage body shell from British Motor Heritage. We ended up actually welding the original tub. So this car uses the original basis. It's not quite Trigger's broom, but it's not far off it. We ended up replacing on the spit, on the rotisserie, we ended up cutting out and welding in 70% of the original metalwork on the body. On an E-Type, every panel virtually is crucial because of the monocoque unitary construction. Ferrari at this time in the 1960s were still very much, right up until the F40 of the 1980s, we're still using an old-fashioned ladder type chassis, very untwacky really, from the 1940s, and Jaguar had used that on the XK 150 right up to the last of the XK series of cars. And then Sir William Lyons, the owner of Jaguar, turned the car market on its head with this, because it was so ahead of its time in a lot of ways. It was taken straight from the Jaguar D-Type with the Le Mans winning car of the late 1950s, with some additional additions. And one of its secret weapons, as I've talked about before, was the independent rear suspension, the IRS, nothing to do with American taxation authorities. And this was one of the jewels in the crown of the Jaguar E-Type, where Ferrari was still using on certain models, independent live rear axles with cart springs. Jaguar were way out there with a completely independent back suspension, which means each wheel was able to cope with the weight transfer, the bumps, the absorption, things like unsprung weight, instead of having a great big axle floating about, heavy thing transmitting energy into the body shell, with the ensuing bumping and rocking and rolling. None of that. Jaguar hit the bullseye with the IRS. It's a pig to work on, as I've explained before. The handbrake pads, calipers particularly, are right on top of the brake discs, right under the back there. Not an easy setup to work on, but from a driving point of view, more than worth the complication, actually. But the whole body shell, particularly this area here, this is where, if you open the door, the only this is obviously just the soft top and frame, so that retracts. There is no targa top, there is no roll bar. This windscreen is the only thing above the waist area that projects upwards on the car, and all the rigidity of the body between the front and rear sections is simply in this area here along the car. So there are several layers of welded sections comprising the sills. I think there's about 4, and there's also a reinforcing section there and one at the rear wheel arch. And the problem is, particularly in Britain, a few harsh winters, I mean, all cars in the 1970s rusted to a greater or lesser degree. Even Mercedes, with their 107 and 116, which were the sort of normal top of the range cars, they rotted like no tomorrow. They really did. It was quite normal for a 3-year-old car in Britain to need welding, because it had just been through a couple of harsh British winters with road salt and one thing and another. And these were no exception. And quite often they could rust from the inside out. So moisture would get in between in a metal box section, of which there are plenty on this car, enclosed box sections. And the humidity of the air would get into the box section and it couldn't get out as easily. So it was stuck in there with changes of temperature. It turned into water, and the thing just rotted from the inside out. So this is an extremely critical area, and this is why we focus on it so much. The other thing James had to do with this was actually just do one side at a time, because if you actually attack both sides of this critical area, the body can actually start to do this. It can float and bend in the middle. And it's extremely important that you get the alignment, retain the alignment, or even restore it if it's been missing, because I've seen E-types with newspaper in the sills over the years and paper mache. I mean, real messes which contribute nothing, thank you very much, to the structural rigidity of the car. But what we do is actually weld a frame in the door aperture so that is fixed. And then we work on the other side, get that all straight, and then grind the slit with the slitting disc, the frame on that side off, on this side, put it on that side, and then do this side. So there's a particular technique to doing this. And if you don't observe that, you can end up in very, very great difficulty. The bonnet itself is quite a complex structure. It's made up of several different sections. These are the 3 outer panels here, and that one over there. Again, it's a big assembly, this bonnet. It's complex by virtue of the fact that it forms almost the front half of the car, at least outside. The bulkhead here is another critical structural area. It's where the frame, there's a square section frame that supports the engine, the suspension, etc., the battery, the brake servo, the steering rack, all sorts of bits and pieces are from here forward. And the frame that bolts onto this bulkhead supports the whole shooting match, basically. And this is also a critical area for structural rigidity. What never ceases to amuse me about the classic car business is the fact that certain models have a relationship to other models in the range. So the early cars had become Series 1s when the Series 2 came out. Then we had the Series 3 type, which was very different again with the V12 engine and the longer wheelbase, because this is a tiny door, actually. The Series 1 for years, sort of in the 70s and 80s, I suppose the early 90s as well, the Series 1 was the one to have, particularly the early cars with the external bonnet catches before they went inside to smooth the look. They had these welded in instead of beautifully let into the centre section of the bonnet. There were lots of things on the Series 1 that made them characterful, and they're a bit like a Lamborghini Miura, an early lightweight Miura. They drive differently to the later E-types, more of a raw experience. Just as one example, the brake servo on the Series 1s brake servos were in their infancy in the 1950s and 60s, and brake servo manufacturers, ATE, Bendix. This one in particular was a Kelsey Hayes, American. And you got a lottery, so you pressed the brake pedal expecting to stop, and you weren't quite sure whether you were getting 1 times brake pedal effort, in other words, no servo assistance at all, 1.5, or the correct 2 times brake pedal pressure. And that was part of the charm of the cars, because you never knew what you were getting when you pressed the brake pedal. And this was pretty typical of the treadle vac system on the first Mercedes 300 SL Gullwings in 1950 up until mid 1955. That was made by Bendix. That was another brake servo mechanism. It was built into the chassis, so it was very difficult to supersede to a later, more efficient system. Required quite major surgery. So we had the Kelsey Hayes brake servo. We had the Moss gearbox, which was a very strong gearbox, and a nice Moss gearbox easy for me to say, is quite a nice thing to have, actually. There's no synchro mesh on first gear, so you have to use first gear skillfully to get the best out of it. Very strong gearbox, but you could have good Moss gearboxes and bad Moss gearboxes. They vary differently from car to car. The Series 2, so basically canned the original Kelsey Hayes servo. It went to a more modern Girling brake servo, British one, which worked far more efficiently, but that's okay because it was just technology moving on. So the brakes were also, the calipers were increased in size, the technology moved on, so the Series 2 brakes are beyond comparison with the Series 1. Actually, you have a consistent brake pedal, and you also have an increased braking area for more efficient braking. The other change from Series 1 to Series 2 was, I mentioned about the Moss gearbox. Jaguar came up with their own 4-speed plus reverse manual gearbox, which was a huge improvement over the Moss gearbox. It was very strong. It would take reportedly well north of 400 brake horsepower through that manual gearbox. It was pretty well unburstable. These days, because like a lot of classic cars, you drive on the motorway, on the highway, the engine is doing maybe at 70 miles an hour, 3,500 revs, which can be easily brought down. The engine has more than enough power and torque to bring that figure down to, and still be able to pull the car along very well at 2,500 RPM. So a lot of people modify the transmissions on them to a 5-speed, an extra gear, to lower the engine revs at cruise. But the brief with this car was to keep it as original as possible. So we have not over-restored this car. One thing on E-Types from the factory particularly was the panel gaps. Some of them were superb and some of them were not so superb. This was a very critical gap here, and also the bonnets where it met with the rest of the bodywork. These were inconsistent from the Jaguar factory because they were churning them out by the thousand. They made over 70,000 E-Types, if memory serves. And they could sell every one that came off the production line, at least for most of the car's life. The panel gaps we've restored to factory original and no more. The colour of the car is Old English white, which was very in vogue then. We've got that exact colour blended. The interior was dark blue with the dark blue soft top. We have made a slight concession in that this would have been vinyl originally, and we've gone for mohair because it's more expensive, which was one of the reasons why it wasn't used at the time, but it just looks far superior and lasts better than the vinyl. But the whole car we have kept faithful to original, so it's all matching numbers. We've restored, as I say, we haven't chromed bits that weren't originally chromed. We haven't gone over the top polishing bits that were originally a sort of semi-dull aluminium finish. One example is we've got painted wheels instead of chrome wire wheels. Most people restoring these days will put blingy chrome wires on. This car was, we took the liberty of getting the original heritage certificate for it. This car originally had painted wire wheels. A lot of Aston Martins did, a lot of Jaguars did, and that's why we've gone this route. And you can make the decision. Do you like the understatedness of the painted wheels, or do you like the blinginess of the chrome wheels? Chrome was a factory extra, but yeah, we've gone for super original on this. So yeah, we've just meticulously gone through every part of the car and considered, everything has been measured and considered, and I have to say I'm delighted with the end result. I haven't driven this car myself yet, but James has driven it. It's at the stage now where we're doing shakedown miles. We have a bit of sunshine and we're starting to be able to get out and road test the cars, which why we've had so many cars on site. Oh, it's always like this at this time of year. And I'm looking forward to driving this because James has reported back to me it is driving beautifully, as a properly sorted E-Type can. I keep going back to this, but restoring a car is not making it look beautiful. You know, there are lots of cars on concours lawns. This is why I'm much more into driving cars. Although I do judge a lot of concours, I'm much more into driving them than looking at them, really. And these can vary massively in driving experience. They can be utterly horrible, or they can be fabulous as they were originally. And 1969, Jaguar E-Type Series 2, just fully restored. Let's take it for a run. I'm going to take this air filter lid off now. It will need a retune once it's run in. The characteristics of the engine do change with time. In fact, the idle speed actually increases as the engine starts to free off inside. It's a bit grubby, needs a wipe over, but it will get that before the customer has it. So there we are. Well, it's a beautiful day here. Spring has sprung, which is rather wonderful. One thing I have noticed immediately is how smooth and quiet it is. We have actually fitted electric power steering to this car, which is another sort of resto mod thing, but that is quite legitimate. A lot of classic cars have that these days, and it does make a big difference, but it's very smooth and quiet. I don't know whether the microphone can pick this up, but it is. I mean, we fitted a stainless steel exhaust to standard specification. It's not a sort of sports exhaust or anything like that. It's very, very smooth and quiet. A little bit of wind noise from around the soft top, but it is 1960s technology, so we allow it that. I'm sure it probably leaks like a sieve in the rain in the winter. And here we are, of course, on our newly tarmacked test run. But it's just the thing that strikes me is the refinement. The ride is not hard or jostly. It's very smooth and very quiet. Quite remarkable, and yet the turn-in is very good. And the car is it's done, I don't know how many miles, 50, 80, 100, something like that, since we bolted it all together. And James has been out testing it, and I mean it tracks very nicely. That's no hands on the steering wheel, and it's pulling to the left slightly, as you'd expect with the camber of the road, but it's nothing to be alarmed about. And the brakes also feel very crisp, considering they're new and not bedded in yet. And you just touch the throttle and it's off. I mean, it's quite interesting. People love having Weber carburetors on cars like this. Aston Martin DB4s, 5s and 6s. Oh, it's got to have triple twin-choke Weber carburetors on a straight 6 engine. They are competition sort of units, or very high performance units. And these engines with the triple SU carburetors, so it's 1 choke per 2 cylinders instead of 1 choke per cylinder, so 3 carburetors essentially. Big 2-inch carburetors, SU HD8s, I think, from memory. But the thing is, it's quite a big throttle, 2 inches, and you can get a lot of air through a 2-inch bore. That means that what I'm trying to say is the throttle response is pretty instant. It really is. And one thing I've picked up on immediately is the gear lever gator is actually just stopping the lever coming fully back. So Craig needs to do something with that. But again, it's the refinement. This Jaguar XK engine is just an amazing power plant, actually. And I'm going to be We've got a very, very interesting video coming up about the ultimate, perhaps the ultimate iteration of the Jaguar XK engine and car. There you are, spoiler alert. Again, I'm just going to pull over and let this gentleman or lady past, because I'm not interested in, I'm not in race mode, I'm in assess mode. So eager. You only have to touch the throttle and it's, there you are, it's like flicking a switch. I'll just use about 1/4 of a throttle. This is a new engine, not fully run in yet. We'll just try that again, about 1/4 throttle. And it's off. That's a standard engine, unmodified, but very lovingly and carefully put together. When this car is run in, it's going to be very quick. Actually, I'll just try that again. Whoops, he says crunching the gearbox. Okay, here we go. That's 1/4 throttle. The car just, the front end just lifts and it's off. And the other thing I noticed is the front end of the car is just down slightly compared to where I would like it to be ride height wise, just maybe 1/4 of an inch, something like that. Jaguar were very specific about the ride height on the front of these cars because it's got an aluminium sump on this and the V12, which is quite prone to, if you hit a rock or something, it's all over. So the measurement, and unfortunately I'm sad enough to be able to quote this from memory from the workshop manual, is 6.5 inches between the lower part of the frame in the engine compartment and the ground. So the frame has got a 6.5 inch setting for the optimal ride height, and I suspect this is about 6.25. They did give a small tolerance, but we like to get it spot on. I'm so happy with the way this car, I mean, everything's functioning properly. We've got some fuel in it by the looks of it, which is always a bonus. I can use the expression what can possibly go wrong, because this is a very early road test, but I can't use the expression open the taps, because we can't, because it's the engine is, it's all just new. We're gradually bringing this recreated car back to life, but I'm really enjoying this. It's just a pleasure. The electric power steering on this, we've used the Dutch one, the EZ power steering. Obviously there are other competitors that have caught up now, but the way it's weighted, the power steering works below 30 miles an hour and then incrementally gets less up to 50 km/h, 30 miles an hour, and it really is, when it's right, it's absolutely lovely. And again, that's 1200 RPM. And that's just about 1/4 of a throttle. It's just off. It's straining at the leash, this cat. It really is. Yeah, I'm deliberately limiting the revs and the load on the engine. These cars were such a sensation and I'll say again, the difference between a good and bad E-Type driving wise is all the world. You can have a car that has had no limit of money or effort spent on it, and it can still be an absolute dog to drive. It really can, if it's not set up properly. It's all in the fine tuning and the setup. At least 20% of a restoration is shakedown and fine tuning and retuning and readjusting. I'm very, very happy with this. We'll just do a few more miles in it. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe and like, and we'll be back with something else very soon.